the conventional market. It's and so the cost of availability of labor is increasingly a challenge. If you want to have conventional fresh, it seems that machine, you're going to have to machine harvest for the most part. You know, everybody wants a machine that we can fresh harvest. Well, we're already there. Most of the conventional blueberries picked in the state of Washington are machine harvest. Anybody know what percent of the organic blueberries in the state are picked by machine? Anybody want to guess? Anyone want to guess? 0. They're all hand-picked. So what about 2023? What are we going to do next year? We don't know what we're going to do this year, so why would we predict 2023? Because that's just what I like to do. So let's say minimal winter injury. Let's say normal pollination, no drought, no excessive temperatures, no floods. We used to never think about floods being a factor of our production, but it was this year. If we had 175 million pounds in 2022, and the other thing is this, a lot of established fields had reduced production in the entire state. There are a lot of growers that had reduced yields on established fields. Those established fields, given this first condition, could be up in production. Plus, don't forget, 20% of our state's plantings are not yet fully bearing. There's a massive amount of fruit that's going to be increasingly coming off of those young fields. It's easy to come up with an 8% increase, which would be another 14 million pounds, which puts us kind of 189 to 194 million pounds next year. Again, keeping this with these caveats. But if growing conditions are favorable and really favorable, we could be over 200 million pounds like this. You know, I don't know whether we're going to do it this year. Probably not. But we probably will next year, and definitely the year after that, we'll be over 200 million pounds. I just want to point out that Whatcom is still the leading producer of blueberries. There's over 8,000 acres, 70 million pounds, and you're still planting. Hey, but so's everybody else. So's everybody else. Skagit is currently, I guess I don't have it in here. Benton County is the second biggest. Between Benton County and Whatcom County, that's probably maybe 70% of production in those two states. Third biggest is Skagit, but that's a distant third. And Franklin County is quickly going to surpass Skagit, and Franklin County will be third, and Skagit will become fourth. 25% acres in Eastern Washington is not yet at full capacity. And I've said this every year. Every year I said 25%. Well, doesn't some of that eventually become fully bearing? Well, yes, but they keep planting it. So there's a lot of fruit coming on. We have, hey, how about this? We got a farm that's 1,400 acres that's 0 on the east side. That is 0% fully bearing. Also, Washington's leading producer of organic blueberries. This sector is growing significantly. One farm in Eastern Washington claims it's going to produce, okay, I'll just show you something later where if you read carefully, it says it's going to produce 36 million pounds, but I don't believe it. I'm going to call it 30 million pounds, and right now it's barely producing any. So this one farm is probably going to put, you know, maybe 28 million pounds more than what we have this year. Also, fresh production is increasing. I just want to point out that there are roughly 30 growers in Eastern Washington with 43% of production. This is, by the way, this is not, obviously not this year's number. We have 210 growers in Western Washington. 60% of all blueberry growers are in Whatcom County. You know, I keep making these references to these big yields, 20,000 pounds, 25,000 pounds. And you all hear about these high prices for organic blueberries. Wouldn't you want to have some, be an Eastern Washington grower, organic, lots of production? Well, I got a deal for you. There's an organic blueberry farm for sale. 36.5 million pounds of blueberries at maturity. Duke, Calypso, Draper, Valor. First planting 2018. Oh wait, they're not done planting. They're almost done planting. Last is going to be planted this year. More than 4 acre-feet of water. When I saw that, I said, how the hell do they get 4 acre-feet of water? I'm on that same district, and I only get 3 acre-feet of water, but why do you need 4 acre-feet anyway? Interesting, it didn't have a price tag on that. I want to point out that when everything is fully bearing, we could be at 250,000 pounds. Could be at 250,000 pounds. And I'll just tell you, this doesn't, okay, this is if y'all stop planting blueberries. If you don't stop planting blueberries, it could be more. Also, it assumes that nothing is taken out. That's what it looks like. I was complaining to Casey Cronquist about, do something about imports, man, they're killing us. And he said, don't think about it as imports, think about it as volume. He was conjuring up this slide. He says, if you're worried about, how can you talk about imports, concerned about imports when we're doing this? So what's a bigger competitor for us? A pound of blueberries coming in October from Peru, or another pound of blueberries coming in from Eastern Washington during our season. But I'll tell you, British Columbia is out there. Canada's forecast to export 113 million pounds in the United States, 42 fresh, 71 processed. This does not include the fruit that we send up there and it comes back into this country. Wait, Peru, holy smokes. Look at this line, and this is 2020. The line goes up like this for 2021. This is a map, a graph that this shows Mexico. Mexico's going up. Peru's going up more, but Mexico's coming in. And if you look in here when a lot of those imports are coming in, this is 2017, and this is 18, 19, 20, 21. When those fall imports are coming in, particularly from Peru, price goes down. One of the latter slides that Casey gave the other just before lunch, he talked about with some extra money that they came in, they wanted to do some work with data. He mentioned this gentleman, Joe Vargas. I was writing up here yesterday, and I got a hold of Joe Vargas, and I said, "Hey, I need this data," and he just sent this to me. They have this thing called a data center, and holy smokes! If you are interested, if you're concerned, if you're worried, if you're excited about the blueberry industry, you need to track this down. There's a lot of good information. Just go to the USHBC website. But this shows you, this is USDA data. And I got right back to him and I said, this is BS, this isn't right. Here's Washington, 30 million pounds. And he said, their data set's not perfect, but it's the best data set. I wonder, Casey, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Do you know if this includes organic production? Is this all blueberries or is it just conventional? What's that? All blueberries. Well, this number for Washington's a little light, but let's don't worry about that. I will tell you, USDA has a very poor track record of data on blueberries in Washington. They do enumeration surveys. There are a lot of new blueberry growers. They're not aware of them. And so they're always underreport what's going on in Washington, but that's simply because they do not have a grasp of all the relatively good growers. But if you look at this by color, this color right here and over here, that's Peru. This is Mexico. When I grew up, we were poor, and I only got 6 colors in the crayon box, and so I'm not very good at distinguishing the differences between these colors. I blame my parents for that. But I believe this color right here is this color right here. This is Washington right here. Right here. It doesn't show us having much in June, but here we are. This color here is Oregon. I can't do all this color. This is Chile, Mexico, and Peru. This is kind of like the United States right here. This also shows you the price here. So this is a better version of that graph I showed you with the price over the few years. So Peru comes in with these big volumes and the price goes down. And Peru has not yet really begun to pump out the fruit like they're going to. And so I assume Mexico is going to increase, but Peru is going to really increase. And you also are going to see this angle here shift this way. And I think you're going to see this angle shift up and over this way. We'll see what Casey said. I'm goading Casey a little bit with saying some of these things and showing some of the data, see what kind of reaction I get out of him when he talks after me. But they're targeting some of these areas where the numbers like right in here. And I'll tell you, I've seen this before. I got this sense of deja vu like you can't believe. In 1990, the Washington asparagus industry produced 100 million pounds of blueberries and was the leading producer of asparagus in the world. That's in 1990. They produced the Andean Trade Preference Act, where they actually gave literally trade preferences to our primary competitors, the Andean countries, with the hope that they would grow asparagus instead of coca leaf and opium. Well, it turns out what they decided to do was to keep growing opium and poppy and grow asparagus. And they single-handedly wiped out the asparagus processing industry. We had the largest, most automated asparagus processing facility in Dayton, Oregon. And just, within a few years, all the factories shut down and collapsed, and that one at Dayton got put into 25 containers and shipped to Trujillo, Peru, and now the Peruvians have the most automated, biggest asparagus processing facility. And they last year we had 12 million acres. We were 88% smaller than what we used to be. And it's just cheap imports. Any crop that is labor intensive, that has a lot of labor, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage. So Peru is going to be a challenge for us. So what will this supply come in of imports due to demand? More importantly, what will do to price? Well, the simple thing is the blueberry market is going to get more challenging. It's going to get more challenging. And the Western Blueberry Commission has very limited ability to influence the marketplace. Hey, but the U.S. High Bush has got $16 million to take care of us. We've got 700,000. They've got 16 million. But don't forget, the majority of that money comes from imported blueberries. I don't know what the number is. We'll let him tell us. But it's probably pushed 60% of the blueberries consumed in the United States are grown outside of this country. But they pay into it, and Casey, I trust, is going to use it in our best interest. So this is a little bit of the history. They have this is the money that we have to work with, and if we're lucky, we might get to $700,000 to do. So what are we going to do with this money? I will tell you what we can do with this money. The two issues I get talked about most is imports and labor. It's like two of the biggest issues. we are not going, we, the Blueberry Commission, is not going to do anything about imports. We're not going to do anything because we can't. We made an attempt to do something about imports. We gave $25,000 to $1 million effort for a 201 investigation. And we didn't just fail, we felt miserable. Now, hindsight's everything, whether we should have done that or not, but people concerned about imports, that was the only game in town. We joined the crowd, we gave $25,000. That was our chance to do something to try and keep out imports. I can't fathom what we could possibly do to restrict imports. I know a lot about this kind of stuff. I've been involved with this for years. I talk to people all the time that know a lot more about it than we do. It's my opinion that we're not going to keep out imports. I almost feel that it's a waste of time to think about it, to talk about it, to put energy into that effort. What we have to do is make ourselves better. We've got to be the best. We just have to compete in this marketplace. I know in the asparagus industry, all the time, our growers say, well, if they would just stay out of our window, if they would just stay out of our season, if they would just give us this many weeks, well, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen for asparagus. It's not going to happen for blueberries. So really the question is, what are we going to do to make us competitive? Well, this is a kind of a poor slide, but I can show you right here. $135,000 was slated this year for promotional efforts. Most of this is foreign, developing foreign markets. $250,000 for research. We budget to it. This is our budget. It's not what we actually spent. We end up not getting enough research proposals to get this. Our administration is $118,000. I always want to point out the administrative is $80,000. Don't think that's what I get paid. I have to pay my bookkeeper. I have to pay the admin. I have to pay all these other expenses and travel and all this stuff. And that number has been flat for several years, just saying. We have some money for labor issues. I want to talk about that more. We're going to have a strategic planning meeting. We do some outreach. We have a $706,000 budget. If anybody thinks they've got a better idea about how to spend this money, if you're the right person, I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell them. But one of the biggest things we do is promotion. Now, U.S. High Bush has something like 7 million. I don't know. This is a year or two is 7 million. I don't know. Casey can tell. Casey, can you off the top of your head just tell me how much you have for promotions? About 10.5 million. I know they've gone up. So they're the ones that have a really big promotional effort. In 2018, but we have a small domestic program just in the greater, it's Snohomish, Skagit, Pierce County area. And we switched to Avado PR. We had been doing just fresh promotion, but now it's 50% fresh, 50% frozen. It's increasing frozen. It's a $35,000 budget. It doesn't amount to much, but they did media articles, Seattle Time, and all these magazines, and whatever total impressions means, whatever that counts for. That 16 million total impressions. Cupcakes are like a big trendy deal, and so we teamed up with a chain of cupcake stores, and they come up with these kinds of cupcakes. Kids recipe, get kids cooking. This came out of COVID when we couldn't do a lot of things we normally do, and so we did a kids recipe, cooking at home. Interestingly enough, 2 years in a row, the winner was out of Tri-Cities, Washington, which seemed a little odd. Social media campaign, total impressions 791,000. We do some work with U-Pick Blueberry Farms as well. So it's a small program, small effort. we did something, we had increased money in 2022 over 2021, and we're looking for some new ideas. And we said, let's do a frozen blueberry promotion. And we've never done this before. This is unusual. We got $40,000, and Miss Liesel, I see, is in the back. Did you bring the checks with you? You do? Where are they? Okay, Miss Liesel is holding some checks there. One of those could be a check for $40,000 from the Washington Blueberry Commission to the USHBC. In case you don't get excited, that was not signed yet. So what we decided to do is the USHBC has a rep in South Korea. They are doing frozen promotions in South Korea. And the idea that we came up with working together was they identified stores, retail stores in South Korea that were working exclusively with Washington frozen exporters, some of which might even be in this room. And what we did was we gave their marketer, we gave USHBC the money. They are going to, their contractor then does promotions for frozen blueberries in stores that only use Washington frozen blueberries. So we've never done something like this before. They came up with this USA Washington Blueberry logo, do frozen promotion. They did mini banners, posters. They hired 77 people to do this. They got the little hats. They got the US. This says US Blueberry, but the logo would be US Washington Blueberry, posters, banners. Look at this: 4 stores, 4 days here, 5 days here, 4 stores. Each one of these. A different processor or freezer in here. Total of 350 stores, 77 helpers. Now just bear in mind, this is 4 days, 5 days. This is 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 4 days. So the W means won. This is US dollars. These are units. So look at this. So this is the one, okay, this is the same 3 days before. This is the 3 days during. Okay, so they had $9,500 more sales. This one went from 83 to 152. That's a 78% increase. This went from 6,000 to 23,000. This one went from 5,000 to 11,000. So it was a $100,000 increase in sales just for 3 days. Just for 3 days. Now the expectation is this is going to increase awareness. I guarantee most of the people buying these blueberries are people that have not bought blueberries before. And so this is a kind of action that will stimulate downstream consumption. And to have a marketing program where in 3 days you increase sales 67%, this is what we call a success. We're very, very happy about this program. Another thing that we do is, so that was the South Korean frozen promotion. This is Oregon and Washington teaming up to do some work in Southeast Asia. This is a logo for a promotion that we did in Vietnam. We teamed up with the Oregon Blueberry Commission to work in Southeast Asia. There are 6 big economies in Southeast Asia. We focus on Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Singapore. Each state, so Washington put in $80,000 of our grower funds and $80,000 of special crop block grants. So that's $160,000 from us and $160,000 equivalent from Oregon. We put $320,000 in. Washington is starting year 3 of 3. Oregon is starting year 3 of 4 in 2023. Unfortunately, COVID just absolutely annihilated us. In the first year in Vietnam alone, sales were for fresh were about something like 2 million pounds. It went down to like 200,000. It went down during our promotional effort, but it's because we were doing like retail promotions and they shut down stores, and it's been a tough deal. Now we ended up not spending all of our $80,000 because we weren't able to do things. This is what was budgeted. We ended up not spending it. And so we are considering going to extend that, use this extra money to go for a 4th year. But COVID was there's no two ways about it. COVID was hard for us. We felt we had to continue. We thought, well, we could shut it down, but then we lose especially crop block grant money. We thought what was best was if we would just keep promoting, don't blink, don't flinch, just keep promoting in those 4 areas. So, but we are seeing the end of that program. It's time to start thinking about the next areas where we might try and get some money and do some promotion. An idea that we had was look at the other 2 of the 6 economies in Southeast Asia, Indonesia and Thailand. We could do like fresh and processed promotion in Indonesia or Thailand, or we could focus on a frozen in South Korea and or Japan. These are ideas of what we might do. We're looking for input on this. We believe going forward, cooperating with the Oregon blueberry industry on marketing effort is important. We think we get more bang for our buck working with them. Also, it's kind of hard to explain, but there's some political realities of us being tied together on this. It makes us play well together, makes us, share our toys and get along better. Somehow there's some added value besides putting their money and our money together. On food safety, we haven't done much on that in 2022. That's probably to our detriment. We have some funds available to do some food safety programming activities, and we're looking at opportunities to help the blueberry industry in this area. The commission was founded in 1969, making it one of the oldest, not only one of the oldest commissions in the state of Washington, but one of the oldest commissions in the United States. And it was funded primarily to start with to do research. Over time, our research budget has climbed. In 2006, we had a $17,000 research budget. We budgeted $250,000 last year on it, but as a percent of our budget, it has actually declined. And part of it is we don't have enough research capacity to support our industry, but 37.5% goes to research. We have a research committee which sets priorities, ranks proposals. We have 39 priorities ranked from highest to lowest. That committee receives the proposals, ranks them, makes recommendations to the full commission, and the commission votes on it. This is the amount of money that we have spent over the last several years, the number of projects, and the average amount per project. But it's surprising to me, this flies in the face of all the other commissions, that the average price of a research project climbs over time. The average research project at the Blueberry Commission has declined over time. There's probably some researchers in there that says, okay, I will fix that for you, but this is the reality. Leighton Orson is the chair of the research committee. It's a little hard to see, but this is a list of the projects that were funded in 2022. You can see some researchers in here, their affiliations, and you see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So half of our projects are new. For a perennial crop like blueberries, to have half of your projects to be new is kind of a little bit interesting. Here we go. I'm going to read them real quick. Fertigation practice for increasing calcium content and improving fruit quality and shelf life of conventional organic blueberries, enhancing the health of permeable soils, support blueberry production east of the Cascades, developing strategies for monitoring and management of mummy-bearing blueberries, control of mummy-bearing botrytis and organic and conventional blueberries, profiling botrytis population for fungicide resistance on blueberries in Northwest Washington, spot spray technology of blueberry herbicide. Chris Benedict, the guy putting on this show, exploring midges in blueberries, evaluating new blueberry cultivars and advanced selection in the Pacific Northwest. Our new blueberry viruses associated with occurring blueberry shock symptoms of erratic blueberry scorch testing, Dr. Walters. Pollinator traction, nectar, pollen assessment technologies, develop an insect IPM program for Washington blueberry industry, the role of the newly identified ludiovirus and occurrence of blueberry shock virus, and mite management in blueberries. By the way, these things are ranked from the highest to the lowest scores of, this is like the one that got the highest votes, next highest votes. My project, mite management, got the lowest, not because of this researcher right here, but rather most people don't have mites as a problem, so it wasn't that high of a priority for most people. I would point out the Washington Blueberry Commission, in cooperation with the Potato Commission, created a blueberry potato pathology position at WSU Mount Vernon. Dr. Machipali is going to be talking here. I'm really, really happy that we did this. We put $200,000 from a reserve fund in 2020, and we're putting in $100,000 over 3 years, and we get a half-time blueberry pathology from now on. This is a swinging good deal. But I'll tell you what's a better deal is we put $100,000 into WSU, and we're getting a 25% for a weed scientist for their research. This person teaches one course, but other than their teaching aside, we get 25% of research and extension for organic and conventional weed control in eastern and western Washington. They'd ask us for $80,000 and this person's going to work in western Washington, and they wanted $80,000. They said, "Oh, we're only short 20,000." I said, "I'll give you another 20,000 to make it 100,000." But the guy's got to work in eastern Washington as well, and he's got to do work on organic organic weed control. And so, of course, WSU took that like a duck on a June bug, and so we got this. Some of the eastern Washington blueberry growers, it's like, you got a plant pathologist, you got an entomologist, you got a weed scientist. What are we getting over in eastern Washington? And so for $20,000, I can say you got a weed scientist that's going to work on organic weed control. So this is a really, really good deal. But we need to continue to build research capacity at WSU and for other research providers. We funded every single project that was submitted to us last year except for one. And it's one that people felt it wasn't a bad research project, but just nobody had an interest in it. We don't have enough research capacity. Now, I think we're in a little bit of a building phase because we just got an entomologist and he's going to submit proposals this year. Next year, we're going to have a weed scientist. They'll be submitting some proposals. So I'm hoping that we're in a little bit of a lull and we're going to get some more research capacity. Labor issues are a problem for us. And in the history of the commission, we have never done anything about this topic. It's just not in our DNA. We do research, we do marketing, we don't touch like social issues. And we don't get involved in political issues until now. We have contributed $20,000 to Save Family Farms to work on labor issues. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because they're going to make a presentation after me and you're going to hear about what they're going to do about labor. I will just tell you that we have, Miss Lisa's got a check back there that's presumably it's going to go to them today for work right now that's actually well underway. And we have another $20,000 in our mind set aside for them for next year. Another thing we're doing is we're coordinating with USHBC to increase exports. Casey got a hold of me and said, "I want you to come to Bangkok to go to Asia Fruit Logistica." I was planning to drive in November back home to our farm in Missouri. I asked Miss Lisa, "What do you think about this?" She said, "Missouri in November or Bangkok? Let's go to Bangkok." So we went to Asia Fruit Logistica, integrated in with USHBC. They had 5 of their 7 in-country reps. Is that right? Something like that. Other in-country reps there. And so I met all these folks and I said, "What do you think about Indonesia?" "Oh, you need to be marketing. What do you think about going to Thailand?" "You need to go there. You need to be doing marketing there." And we're doing some other things to coordinate with USHBC. We had a meeting yesterday. We tried to get as many of the importer reps as we could at a meeting yesterday with USHBC. They have a director for exports, Renata Dalton. She came up, gave a masterful communication about all of the upscaling and all the work that they're doing. They have a goal to double exports in a very short period of time. And the only way they're going to be able to do it is frozen. They're not going to be able to do it with fresh. I hope Casey says something like this. Casey, you're keeping track of all these things you're supposed to talk about. They can't increase exports sufficiently to meet this goal by fresh. It's got to be with frozen. Hey, what did I say frozen is? Frozen's on the West Coast. Who's the biggest producer of frozen? It's Washington. It's Washington. We are going to be partnered up with, we don't know exactly what it looks like, but we're increasingly coordinating our effort with USHBC to increase exports. That's my idea. That was their idea. We're going the same direction. This is a map. We got British Columbia here, obviously Washington, Oregon, California. The West Coast is in this effort. The blueberry industry on the West Coast is in this effort. And we need to work together like our existence depends on it. We need to think of this area here as the same big pile, a big blue pile of blueberries. And we need to work together, all of us work together to deal with this increasingly big amount of blueberries. Now, we haven't always acted like we're working together, like our existence depends on it, but it's past time to start. So, how long has it been since Canadians ambushed me and said, what about this 201 investigation? How could you put this money into the 201 investigation? How long has it been? Well, let's see, about 60 minutes ago. So Washington is going to amend its relationship with the BC blueberry industry. We're going to figure out ways that we're going to work together, like we're working with Oregon. We do some coordination with California. It's a little harder for us to coordinate with them because of geographic distance differences, and basically their fruit comes off at a completely different time as ours. So cooperation is important and valuable to us. We work really closely with the Washington Red Raspberry Commission. Henry and I coordinate all the time, and whenever any of us do things, we always talk about if there's ways to work together. I've already mentioned Oregon Blueberry Commission. We work closely with them, with the California Blueberry Commission, USHBC, North American Blueberry Council. We need to pull this group together a little more tightly. I also want to mention that the Blueberry Commission is going to have a strategic planning mission meeting December 8th and 9th. We're going to have 15 industry representatives are meeting there, and we're going to look at everything we're doing and say, do we need to be doing this, or are there other things we should be doing? I will tell you right now that we have a proposed budget for next year, and we have a line item with 6 digits in it that's just set aside for new programming activities. And that, Fred, that 20,000 for you guys that we may be giving you is not in that. We already count that as an existing program. We need some new ideas. We think that maybe we need something like a Washington Blueberry Council, something that's private, that's voluntary, that can do things that we are really hidebound by the things we can do. If it's not in our enabling legislation, we can't do work on it. We can't go to a hearing and bitch about something if it's in opposition to what the governor tells us to say. We may want to do some increase in domestic marketing, increase engagement on state issues. We went to the old PMA. People came back. Michaela Staples was one of our people that went there. Someone from Dr. Bees went there to represent us. And Michaela came back and said, you guys ought to be doing this and this and this and this. It's like, well, we don't do marketing at the national level. We don't go out to trade shows like this, but maybe we should. I've got a couple seats open for this meeting. I'm particular on who gets in. You got to be team oriented. You can't be a goofball. You got to be look to the future. But I'm looking for a few good men or women. And that's my talk. Does anybody have any questions, comments, grenades? Ravi? Yeah. Hang on one second. You got to get a microphone to Mr. Gill over here.
Thank you. Exports, frozen Washington State, are they subject to MRLs?
100%, just like fresh. Now, they may be different than fresh. No, they're not different. They're the same. Yes, they are. Listen, Camille Holloway in the back there and I are giving a talk about MRLs and residues later this afternoon. Another question, another comment? Brian Sakuma, are you in here? He's going to duck his head. Give the microphone to Brian Sakuma, and I must have said something that makes you want to respond. Anything you want to add?
We just have a lot of stuff going on.
All right. I can't, you got to put up closer to now.
I said there's a lot of stuff going on with exports that you just mentioned. We're trying to get out in front of the pile of supply, trying to get things going to different countries. It's a high priority.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Gill, you got one more question.
I would just like to talk about one of the challenges that we have in Western Washington State is that if exporting countries require MRL standards, a lot of the farmers are many farmers are supposed to be certified with a few, so it's highly decentralized. So it's difficult to get the scale on the same page and spray for the same MRLs and the scalability.
So come to our talk. We're going to give you some hints on how to work with some of those MRLs. We're preparing some educational materials. They should be available at the beginning of next year about how to meet some MRLs. The other thing I can say is you got to work closely with your crop advisor. The crop advisor is your best friend on working with MRLs. Okay, we're gonna change gears. I got to do the Industry Service Award right now. So here's the award. So I'm not very good at doing this from a suspenseful way. You're supposed to do it with the least obvious thing going to the more obvious thing, but I'm not that sophisticated. All I got here is the guy that gets it this year is Leighton Overson. Leighton is the chair of the Washington Blueberry Commission Research Committee for I don't know how long, 10 years or so. He also is the Washington Berry representative to the Washington State Commission on Pesticide Registration, also the Washington Berry representative at Northwest Small Fruit Research Center, crop advisor at CHS. He's also on the Washington Raspberry Commission Research Committee. And I said, I offended a couple people when I said he's the single most knowledgeable berry advisor that we have in the state of Washington, which hurt a couple people's feelings because they thought I would have said them. The most common refrain when I asked people about Leighton was this word, reliable. Reliable. And another one was he's just good at his job. He is more than just a friend to this industry. He's one of our secret weapons. The other thing, come up here, Leighton. What, did Lincoln leave? Oh my God. He probably found out and did this just to irritate me. See, Eric Gerbrand, are you in here? He wasn't. All right. Hey, Eric, what did you say he's ranked in the world? Oh, Leighton. Number 7 in his age level. He is ranked 7th in the world in the Ironman competition. So that's a very impressive thing. I should have looked. He ducked out during my talk. Come on, Miss Liesel. Come up here, Lee. I got something for you. What the hell are you doing going out on my talk? You're getting the Industry Service Award. I didn't have anything good to say about you. Come on up. Is it true that you're number 7 in the world for 50-year-olds? The next presenter is Dylan Honkoop from Safe Family Farms. We wanted to talk about some of the work that we're having them do for us. It's not just for us, for the industry. I'll let Dylan.
I'm not Dylan, but I am gonna just switch things up so we can show you guys the videos we got for you.
I might as well just get going. Thank you guys so much for having me here this afternoon. I am Dylan Honkoop with Safe Family Farming and also host of the Real Food, Real People podcast. Here to number one, thank you guys for your support for what we're doing, the generous gift to help support our efforts on particularly labor. That's what we're going to be talking about here for a few minutes. We saw in Alan's State of the Washington blueberry industry report a little bit earlier that labor is really, I mean, he talks about a lot of people talking about imports and talking about, well, what can really be done about imports. I'll stay away from that conversation. But the next biggest thing being labor. Who's really pumped for where things are headed with labor costs and labor challenges and labor supply? I don't think I'd get anybody to stand up in this crowd to say, yeah, they're happy with where things are. So what are we gonna do? That's the question. Yes, Clara is now awake. Just for your head snap, awake. So what do we do about this labor issue? And particularly, but we're keyed in, and there's multiple layers to labor challenges, of course, right? Especially in blueberries, another very labor intensive crops. How to get enough people, you know, even things like the guest worker program and all layers of regulations, heat rules, smoke rules, L&I stuff, the list goes on and on and on. But one of the biggest pressures right now, and people felt it a little bit this year, does the number 55 mean anything to anyone? 55 hours being the overtime threshold next year. Who's ready? Who's got a plan for 48 hours? Who's ready for 40 hours being the time and a half threshold for labor here in Washington State? And how does that put us in a position to compete on this world stage, this world marketplace that we've just been talking about? It's a huge challenge, and it's going to get a lot bigger in the next couple of years. And just so it turns out that Washington State is now the only state in the US that doesn't have any flexibility once we get to that 40-hour threshold, 2024. So not this coming year, but the year after. 40 hours in a week is the threshold where you have to start paying time and a half overtime. We're the only state that doesn't allow any flexibility for seasonal work, like what we're talking about here with blueberries and anywhere really almost across the entire farming community. Why is that? Well, you know, we could take quite a bit of time to go back through the history of how this came to be. I think looking at a little bit of that is important to understand what we need to do going forward to change the situation. What can we even do as labor costs go up and up and up, way faster even than inflation when you look at the graphs, at a time when labor supply is incredibly difficult as well, just to find people to get the work done. So this is a big issue. I know it affects basically everybody, not just the farmer, but the farm worker as well. And that's an important part of what we want to do about this. Again, I'm with Safe Family Farming. We're a public outreach organization. And so some might be asking, well, how are you going to post some videos on social media and change this situation? Well, we think there's a strategic process that we can follow here to affect some change in coordination, when and where appropriate, with other folks working on things like lobbying in Olympia and policy and promotion and all these other pieces. We all need to be flying information, but the part that we want to help play as Safe Family Farming is to show the nature of this issue and to appeal to that urban public that controls the politics in Olympia. Who's super pumped about how politics are going in Olympia right now? No hands, none, anywhere. Why is this? Why is Olympia so dysfunctional? Why are they doing things that don't help people? Yet they go around telling their constituents, or most of them live in the city and are disconnected with farming. Why is it that they're doing all these things, telling them that they're doing great stuff, but we know the real people affected by this, it's actually hurting people across the board. It's making local food less accessible. It's making it harder for workers to make a living wage when they say exactly the opposite. What is happening in Olympia that's causing that? And that's where we think public outreach is part of this recipe, part of the reason why this is a problem in the first place. So to roll back the clock just really quickly, and I know I don't have a ton of time because we're going to get to Casey Cronquist in a few minutes. I was pumped to see Casey here because I met him in Las Vegas at the CL conference earlier this year, and I'm looking forward to hearing from him. So I don't want to bump into too much of his time, but to just go back a little bit, there's been ongoing pressure on this issue. You've probably seen conversations about it in public media, various kinds, social media, traditional media, building a narrative that we in the farming community know is almost entirely false about how workers are so hard done by, so downtrodden, treated poorly. It's this constant drone from people that we know aren't actually in the farming community and on the ground to see. And one of the big things was overtime, and how it's a hit against people's dignity, and it's a personal issue. There was all this anger, outrage built up about this. So we have to understand the process here. Their goal was the overtime that we now are phasing in here in Washington State. But they didn't do that all in one fell swoop. They built that narrative. They seized the moral high ground. This is how, because this was largely driven by activism here in Washington State. This is how activism works. Activists built a narrative that workers were being exploited, was the term. They spun that to an urban public who's disconnected enough with the world of farming that they don't know anything different. How would they know that that's not true? How did they get this to the public? They leveraged their relationships within the media, their social media influence, et cetera, to build this narrative. So it started with seizing that moral high ground. They were the ones, they claim, who care about the workers. And the evil, terrible farmers are trying to use the farmers and don't, or farm workers and don't care. We know that's a reality turned on its head, right? But that was the narrative they spun. They seized that moral high ground. They were standing up for the little guy, and the bad guy was the farmer. And again, they leveraged their relationships in media. They got a lot of buzz about it, a lot of coverage, articles, stuff on TV, stuff in social media, and they built this whole thing. This needs to happen. In this case, it ended up having an influence on the courts here in Washington, as well as legislators, where in, what was it, late 2020, we had a ruling from the Washington State Supreme Court on this issue. They found a case that they could win. That was a dairy farming case. Ever since that ruling, dairy farming has already been at 40 hours. 40 hours a week is already the threshold where they start to pay time and a half overtime. And already when that happened, dairy farm workers were frustrated with it and recognizing that it was actually hurting their bottom line, but we'll get to that in a minute. Again, remember, that's the moral high ground here, taking care of workers. What are we doing to take care of workers? After that ruling, it went to the state legislature. There was a big brouhaha over it, back and forth. And that's where initially they were calling for lawsuits even to get back pay, back 3 years to the statute of limitations. You guys remember this? Where farmers, because they hadn't paid time and a half, and then there was this court ruling that they were going to actually have to pay back how it would have been calculated, no one knows. It would have been a major fiasco. We at that time got involved after that ruling. We need to speak out and show what the truth is here, because the truth is this situation that they're building for work, it's actually bad for workers and for farms and for local food all across the board. I'm at 10 minutes. Okay. So at that time, we started placing information out there to share the story, yes, of the farmer, but much more importantly, remember, what was that moral high ground? What was this issue all about in the first place? It was about the workers. And the truth about this ruling, about then what happened in Olympia with the legislation, is it hurt those very workers that they claimed it was supposed to help. So we knew we needed to share that story. Yes, is it going to put farms out of business? Does it make it tougher to produce local food? Yes, all those things are true, but we know the salient point for that urban public that is driving the politics in Olympia is how workers are being treated. And we know that this change is bad for those workers, despite what the activists who pushed it all to happen in the first place said. So we need to share that story of those workers. We began doing that in 2021 during the legislative session, and we're renewing that effort as we head toward this coming legislative session to show, and again, it continues to get worse as this threshold moves its way down 55, 48, and then 40 hours. More and more people are feeling this. Workers are having to get second and third jobs. Their hours are being cut because farms simply cannot afford to do time and a half during busy season in a seasonal job, when we know in farming you make hay when the sun shines, but the folks in Olympia don't understand that. So what do we have to do? We have to share those stories of the workers who are being hurt, because that's the truth, and that is what is compelling and what the urban public has said they care about. Go ahead and roll that video. This is the first pilot video that we've started working on.
El overtime a algunas personas sí les va a beneficiar, pero a nosotros la verdad no nos beneficia. we're not gonna be able to pay all this overtime because we have to harvest and there's different things that go into this industry. Pues estos cambios acerca de las regulaciones de overtime, yo precisamente hemos sido muy afectados. Antes trabajaba en educación temprana, yo era supervisora de las maestras en educación temprana. So nada más eran 6 meses al año. Siempre estaba buscando trabajo durante el invierno. Entonces, por eso me metí a lo que es la agricultura.
En tiempos atrás ellos venían, trabajaban muchas horas, llevaban más dinero para su casa. Pero si sigue siendo todo así, ellos van a trabajar menos y van a llevar menos dinero para su casa. El trabajo lo va a hacer, pero los afectados van a ser nosotros, los trabajadores.
A lo que yo he escuchado de los trabajadores, pues todos, hasta los contratados que vienen, ellos antes agarraban sus buenos cheques y ahora en realidad pues, hasta para ellos también, para todas las personas que han trabajado aquí, realmente muchos andan renegando que se van a ir a buscar otro lado, donde haya más horas. Entonces los más que hacen es de irse a buscar otro lado para poder sobrevivir.
Eso estaría muy bien pues para seguir pensando en poder seguir veniendo para acá y no pensar en que me conviene mejor quedarme en México. O sea, esa es la principal diferencia de que trabajas aquí un día y lo que ganas aquí allá es casi lo de una semana de trabajo. Pues ya no es lo mismo como antes de que te daban horas como diciendo, bueno, lo que esperamos hacer, se daba eso. Y eso ya afectó mucho a lo que es a mi familia.
I think the people that have the power and that are making all this stuff have good intentions, but they don't know that industry. And they need to come and really hear from our guys that are working in the fields that they don't mind working those hours, that's what they do and that's what they know how to do. And they are really perfect. What's gonna happen is a lot of people are gonna leave this industry. We're not just replaceable like that because we have a relationship with this small community. It's a small community, a small farm.
Okay, so we were working with you guys with tree fruit, with dairy, quite a few others. Thank you for your support. We're going to continue to put out videos like this. Actually, a bunch of short videos is what we're going to be doing to connect with that urban audience. We know time spans are short, or attention spans are really short. We have 18 different interviews so far recorded with different workers sharing their personal stories. We want this to be in front of the urban public, and we want this to be in front of lawmakers. I sent this video today to the House Labor Committee members, so they will be seeing this as well. We need to show them in Olympia that this is a problem and something needs to be done. Thank you guys for your support with it. We have a lot more to come, and we're going to continue to need support because this is a long-term effort to turn this around and share the truth about labor in farming here in Washington State. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Dylan. Casey, come on up here.
All right, well, I'm going to jump into it because I'm not going to say we're short on time because Alan says I can just keep going. But recognizing that we all have places to go, I'm going to share a little bit about things that Alan already discussed from our perspective. But I would say I'm inviting Alan to stay up here because he put me on the spot so many times. I can't remember all the things that he wanted me to make sure I cover. But I did want to come back to production as the subject that we talked about in terms of relating to demand programs that we represent at USHBC, because there is a lot of fruit coming into the North American market. But I think oftentimes, one of the benefits of being the host of the Business of Blueberries podcast is like each week listen to the crop report that ends up becoming a production for the show. And it's really helpful to hear, directly from those guys what's actually happening in the country. So part of what I'm sharing with you today are things that we already share on the podcast week in and week out, but they are the numbers that we're working with them and trying to understand, the scope of their business as well as discussing the scope of ours in the U.S. market. So, this may be a little bit of a clickbait title, do we have enough supply? But globally, I think we were here last year, a year ago, saying, we don't have enough supply for the potential opportunity that exists for blueberries globally. It just isn't. That's why there is so much planting going on. If you listen to some of the podcasts that I've done, like with Steve Magami from Agrovision, which is one of the biggest blueberry producing companies in Peru right now, that's why they're building their business plan forward, is that they see global market opportunity for blueberries, not just in the United States. Just like I shared earlier this morning, there's a lot of potential to get realized, not just in the United States, which is where blueberries come, but globally. That's why we're seeing a lot of fruit go on the ground in these other countries. So again, I do want to kind of talk through some of the numbers that it's not really. Did I mess that up? What's up? No. Oh, now it's working. Okay, so at every one of our 2 meetings a year, we share information together. So the area reps come up on stage at the NBC meeting, and if you haven't been to one of our either spring or fall meetings, I really encourage you to attend. It's a great opportunity to hear directly from the area reps. Alan oftentimes will be your area rep here in Washington, otherwise it'll be Brad Skuma. But every one of them get up and they give their crop report. But what's interesting about this information in this over here is you'll see that our forecast over the 2022 crop didn't come in at all quite like we expected relative to what really happened. So the end of the season reality, as you can see in the final report that came in at our NBC meeting, was about 125 million pounds off. So, we didn't hit the numbers that were projected. And lots of folks, for good reason, can say, well, it's not really fair to me to tell you what we think we're going to do before we actually do it. But that's how far we were off domestically in our anticipation for our 2020 crop forecast. And we're already making a 2023 crop forecast. I don't know if we can change the little, move that little box, but underneath that number is a much more conservative, I think it's 669 million or 96 million in the forecast. So they've actually pulled that number back to be a little bit more conservative from what they had predicted in 2022. And so you go through the states, you can see here, California was predicting 88 million pounds, but for a number of reasons, they only ended up with 55 million pounds. Oregon was predicting 170 million pounds. They ended up with 153 million. Washington did better than expected, coming in at 175, but still under their original forecast. Michigan was predicting 79, came in at 65. New Jersey was predicting 42, it ended up with 32. And Florida actually did better than expected. Georgia, I don't know if you follow Georgia blueberries, but this is pretty much par for the course. There's always something that happens in the season. It just turns out that they predicted 8 million pound crop, and something happened. There's 2 freezes. In North Carolina, also had some weather issues. 45 million were predicted. They ended up with 31. But all told, it was still a large season in the U.S., but certainly impacted by a number of weather-related events. The Pacific Northwest certainly one of those regions that were affected by weather issues. So again, you can see here where we've dialed back some of the aggressiveness of that previous forecast, and now it's 696 million pounds between all the states. Now, if you move to what we're doing here as an industry, you can kind of see where we can show our growth patterns. So you saw some growth patterns shared by Alan. Joe helps put these together for me now. I think in future years, Joe will be up here with me and talking to all of you about the information that's a lot more like what he spends his days doing. And so less Alan and Casey and more Joe kind of walking through kind of a holistic approach to, I mean, no offense, I don't do a good job, but so no offense. We're going to bring Joe up and he can kind of carry the numbers for the day, talking through the kind of the direction of where we see production in the United States heading. And you can kind of see here, even with the wild numbers in here from May, the breakout, Washington obviously being the largest. So it's still growing, and then yet you see some hesitation in the last couple of years due to some of the weather events that we've experienced, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. And any questions on these numbers? So these are a combination of like AMS and the numbers that our area reps provide us. This is where this report, and to be fair, this is typically an NABC member benefit where we collect this information and provide it back to our NABC members. But that's why you see the sources, the NABC crop report combined with USDA NAS. So we're welcoming you to always be a member, always have access to all the news reports, the numbers that Alan pulls together coming from that same database. But today we want to be able to kind of describe a little bit what we're seeing in the marketplace in the United States. So this is where we talk about the import numbers, the import forecast versus the end of season reality. You'll see that, you know, the British Columbia was predicting 115, ended up with 77. Mexico predicted 177 million, ended up with 175. Chile 163, ended up with 173. And Peru 339, ended up with more than expected 351. For a total, if you go all the way over, 1.3 billion pounds. So all that together between the U.S. supply, and this is just what's coming into the United States. That number here, but Alan is right. If you add those up, we're predicting about a 1.8 billion pound crop between the imports to the United States, and the wild industry participating in the marketplace. So it's an increasing pile, and it's certainly something that, you know, is going to continue to grow. Alan kind of gave some of those forecasting numbers. As you can see here, this is the information that Luis provides us. And what's important about this slide is this is what he provides us every week in a crop report. So Luis comes on and he talks about all the different countries that are exported to, both fresh and frozen. You can get a sense here that yes, the USA is the biggest market, but Europe, which is represented by Holland, is where they send their fruit to distribute. China's another big piece of their strategy. And you can see that, again, not all of it's coming to the United States. A good portion of it's moving to other parts of the world by their strategy. And in fact, we're trying to get a little bit more connected with what that strategy is, because you heard me give my overview of how we see global market development. It's important for them to find these other markets to put their fruit in, otherwise it's probably coming here. And so we're working a lot closer to kind of understand what is their global market strategy, how's that related to our global market strategy. You know, considering that they're to be a counter-seasonal provider to food for our country, there are those same partnership opportunities in some of these other countries. So we're working with Luis to kind of understand, you know, where do we want to go? Where do you want to go? Where can we put resources in trying to replicate the U.S. market demand in some other countries so that they're eating more blueberries like we're here in the United States in these other parts of the world. So it's important to try to look at that volume that Alan was saying, I'm describing as a global volume against a global audience of people who can absorb this fruit, and working within those countries who can afford the fruit, because we're not trying to chase strawberries down on price and try to increase pounds based on lower price fruit. We're trying to keep that price high while also selling the pounds. That's why I always use the avocado example for us to aspire towards, which is we can increase the interest and demand on blueberries such that we keep that price per pound high while also significantly increasing the pounds that are going out to these markets around the world, including ours. So marketing and promotions is really important in order to drive that demand, suck up all this volume that feels like it's more than we can handle. But given the opportunities that still exist out there, this is still fruit that these companies who are putting fruit in the ground, plants in the ground, see as opportunity ahead for the globe. Mexico is obviously, this is an important slide based on some of the conversations we've had here about where Mexico sees their market. It's just us, they're just bringing it here. And in conversations with lots of folks in the industry about Mexico's interest in not just this market, but expanding their market development to look at other countries besides the US. It's part of those conversations we're having with them, like where else can food go? It's not just bring fruit here. The challenge is that they provide fruit at an important low point in the marketplace that is why they're in the market, providing fruit with the marketers that we work with here in the United States to get those retailers the fruit during that low part of the season. So they're not going to go away from providing that volume during that period of time. But just like the conversation we had this morning, it's an important part of their plan to diversify away from just our market and look at the globe like we're looking at the globe as being an important place to have an outlet for fruit beyond the United States. Canada, obviously they're looking at our market primarily, but they also ship a lot of fruit to other places in the world. But Canada's fruit projections have gone down over time, moving into the US. So this is those exports into the US from Canada have actually decreased over the last couple of years. And then Andres from Chile's report really showing that if there's a country that's been hurt the most by Peruvian fruit being imported in this country, it's been Chile. Chile's had to try to make huge adjustments to try to compete with that time of year, the counter season of the US, combined with just the quality of fruit in comparison to the varieties that they've had around over so many years. So their largest competitor has been Peru, and if anybody's been challenged the most by Peru coming into the market, it's been Chile coming into this market. And they're making adjustments as well. So while they have certainly been challenged by Peru's fruit, it's also forced them to look at new varieties, new ways to compete with what Peru has in the ground in order to either compete in this market or compete elsewhere in the world. So again, I share this slide just to connect the dot that, well, we are promoting USA blueberries with the funds that we have that are coming from USDA. It does represent the largest amount of money going into the globe for marketing purposes. And so that's why it's important for us to work with Alan and work with others around the country and around the world to try to identify these new marketplaces and really consolidate that effort so that we can do a lot more business in fewer countries instead of the spaghetti on the wall approach of trying to see what sticks. Really trying to determine where do we have the best opportunity to move the most amount of fruit and create essentially the US model in other parts of the world. And so this is just us saying we want to be the point of the spear. We're probably the organization with the most resources, as Alan liked to put on one slide, saying yes, we have $16 million. It's not $16 million that's going to develop the entire world, but it is the largest budget to help kind of magnetize focus around the world and encourage people to market into marketplaces that have the best opportunity to grow blueberries. Already talked about this, but then again, why this becomes important is that the importers of record who have signed on to the MOU have increased a doubling of their assessment voluntarily on top of what has already been contributed through the mandatory assessments. And I wanted to share this because it's significant to recognize that, yes, Alan already pointed out or suggested that imports have become a larger part of our budget recently, eclipsing the domestic totals of assessments collected. But then on top of that, I don't know if the green's showing up. Yeah, there. So you'll see when they combine the green, which is the MOU funds, on top of what they're already mandatory required to participate in our program with, you can just see how much more they're contributing into the program in order to drive demand. And again, that came out of those conversations in that 201 investigation where I think our industry recognized we don't want to end up back into a trade corporate. We want to try to figure out what is it going to take so that we can create a lift in consumption with the supply that's coming in. And what has happened is those folks that are responsible, a large number of those folks who are responsible for that supply coming in, are voluntarily contributing that increase on top of what they're already required to contribute in order to help us address supply. Again, you know, it could be said and has been asked even today about, well, why don't you just increase the entire assessment and just make it mandatory for everybody? But obviously, coming out of the 201 investigation, that wasn't very palatable to our domestic growers. And again, I think it was the good faith effort upon those who do want to see what they're bringing into the country to be successful, on top of just seeing the entire industry be successful, where this conversation of, well, why don't we volunteer more resources into the program to help with demand? So again, I wanted to just highlight here where those contributions are helping to, you know, even increase further what contributions are coming in. And then the next slide here is something that has gotten discussed. Somebody asked me, well, at what point does the total investment of what the domestic industry has put in over 20 years is eclipsed by the total investment that the importers of record have contributed over that same period of time? So you can see at the very beginning, obviously, there was more domestic contributions being made, majority of the budget coming in the USHBC, mostly domestic. But in 2023, 2024 is actually when we predict that total investment to be eclipsed when you consider the contributions of those MOU dollars being added on top of what they're already obligated to pay. So is it fair? Well, I think at this point, it's just a necessity that we do more with more. And so we're not having a conversation with those who are contributing today, do they think it's fair? They're pulling out more resources because they believe it's the right thing to do in order to try and drive demand. Fair, to be clear, right, is where I get the other question. Well, why don't you just increase all the assessments on everybody who's in this business? And that is truly the most fair way to do this. As the president of an R&D program that's overseen by USDA, part of the value of working for this organization is that the USDA created these RFP programs, and they are the most fair way to accomplish the work that any one industry is expected to have accomplished on their behalf. Otherwise, you're left with trade organizations like the NABC or any Farm Bureau or Chamber of Commerce organization that tries to do good on behalf of their respective constituents or members. But it generally becomes the 80-20 rule, where 20% pay, the other 80% ride for free in any one of those types of environments. And so, and you never quite have enough money to accomplish those things that 100% of everybody thinks needs to be done. And so when they created the RFP programs, they created mandatory assessments across the board to make sure that there's always a referendum, so that there has to be a majority of the industry that supports its continuation. But it is the most fair way of trying to do right by the industry. And if there's something else that I haven't seen or ran across in my 10-year career in association management, tell me about it. I'll go work there. But right now, the RFP programs, and there's only 22 of us in the country, stand to be the most fair way of collecting resources to accomplish the work on behalf of the industry. So this Washington State Commission RFP program at the federal level, these are resources and tools you don't want to let go of, because if you're like the pistachio industry or another one of these commodities that have lost theirs over time, they're never getting it back. And so these kinds of conversations we're having today about what we think we can still do to try to address our industry are accomplishable because they have the resources to do that. Once you don't have that ability to collect or sit down and strategize or come up with a new marketing plan or strategy, then nobody's coming around that table. Money was the that's why we're having these conversations and trying to figure out how we're going to work together to address, in this case, supply globally coming on throughout the world. So I think that covers, talked about where we're putting those resources between data, marketing, and advocacy. Talked about the great companies who have already signed on to helping us increase those resources that the USHBC has to accomplish the work that you see on the advocacy side. And we're hoping to continue to bring more of those companies into this MOU contribution. I think I covered it. What else, Alan, was I supposed to make sure I...
You're supposed to leave time for questions.
Oh, questions.
Or feedback from the audience.
Thoughts, feelings, suggestions. Yes.
Talked about Chile being the loser
Most impact.
What is their, how does the cost structure compare in Chile versus Peru? Can they compete against each other or is there?
Yeah, the problem they're competing on is varieties, and so they're losing on flavor and quality. So Peru's advantage is that it's newer, and they put different varieties in the ground that the retailers and consumers will prefer. And so the buyers on our side are just making different choices. There's a home for a lot of that fruit too, right? I mean, they're having to pivot. We're seeing more probably processed blueberry consideration comes from Chile than ever before. We're watching that. They're moving more into organic. They're trying to make adjustments, but if there's been a region in the world that's been most impacted by COVID. And of course, the same challenge here, right? The same companies who planted in Peru are the same companies that are invested in Chile. It's not all the same exactly, but it's just where you have new investment, new varieties, better fruit, work that comes on. It's a challenge. So they're replanting, they're trying to refigure it out. I just want to make a point. There's a growing region in the world that's been most impacted by COVID. What do you mean by the structure? No,
They're different growers from Chile.
those are different growers, but the companies that represent those growers are the same. So you'll have water fruit in both Chile and Peru. Alpine.
I think most of them are different.
But the structure, I'm not sure. Size of production.
I can't hear.
You said that the main companies were from Chile.
Hi, I'm Cristian Vivanco from Dr. Beast, and I'm from Chile. And yes, at the beginning, yeah, the company's name was from Chile. But what's the problem right now from Chile is that the high cost of the workforce. So this is the main thing. And the Peruvian growers are not happy because still, the government trying to help subsidize back by the way. We try to sell this is a change for now. Anyone presently.
Casey, yeah, one thing I don't think you said is, or I didn't hear that you said, it seems odd. I don't know any grower here that would voluntarily pay more than what they have to in assessment. If anybody wants to do that for the state assessment, please see me afterwards. Right, the line is going right here, but in Peru and Mexico, not really in Canada, more than a simple majority of the production has signed up to pay extra on their assessments. I don't think you explained adequately why growers that are importers are willing voluntarily to pay.
Well, I mean, I think part of the spirit of it is that they recognize so if you use the avocado industry as the example, a lot of the Peruvian and the Chilean growers and the Mexico growers identify with avocados because they're also growing that fruit. They recognize what they're paying for success in that category. And it's a lot more than they find them paying us to do that same activity for blueberries. So that was part of the spirit of that conversation was, if we want to do work, folks, we need to contribute. And it was recognized that we can't also then just fairly increase the assessment because they just walked out of the ITC trade case. And so a number of those folks said, we'll do this. It's voluntary. We can pull it if it doesn't work. We can pull it if we don't like how it's going. But something needs to be done. And we're willing to help make this happen because it's not about the supply. It's about how do we better market to increase demand because their experience was avocados and the success they have seen over time in that investment for that particular fruit. And that was the spirit of that conversation of we will contribute, and maybe it is a conversation up until an assessment increase can take place, but I would say, not committing on their behalf, but the spirit of the conversation was such that even if the assessment increased, they would still maintain a higher investment into the program goals. Because once you set the vision of, making blueberries the world's favorite fruit, and all of the other goals and objectives that are in our strategic plan, they all take time and money. And so it's one thing if you've been in a strategic planning session to say, you're going to go light the world on fire and walk out the door and realize you don't have that kind of money to accomplish it. These folks were coming around the table saying, we want to do these things, and it's going to cost us more to accomplish that goal. And we're willing to invest in that plan. And so you have a strategic plan development, money coming forward. Hopefully, starting to see what that other difference if you do have that program to share earlier. So once you start to move into channels like food service that you're not as successful as some of the other ingredient companies are, food manufacturing, retail, you can change the trajectory of the that was the spirit of it.
Yes, when do you leave?
As soon as I'm done talking.
You leave today?
But yes.
All right, let's give Casey a hand for coming up. It's break time. You guys want to, Chris, do you want to go?
Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming to the Blueberry Commission meeting with us. And so this next session will happen, there will be talks here and talks in the CHS room. If you want pesticide credits, you need to go over to the CHS room. Here are short breaks. We're only at like 10 minutes.